That said, I guess I'll ask if Lisa or Norma have anything they want to offer before we get started.
No, I think we're all set. Norma and Samantha produced the packets that are before you that have summary of all of the legislative proposed amendments to the budget, as well as the backup request documentation that goes along with it. So you should have paper copies of that in front of you, and it's also been emailed.
That is correct. There's a couple that came in kind of last minute. I had a few this morning and maybe one late Friday that are not in this packet, but you will get them. So
Okay.
keeping up as much as we can.
All right, thank you. Now, we have a suggested order of business. I noticed the first item on here is OTR 97, which involves TC3. Bill Talbot at TC3 has another commitment right at the moment and said that he can't be here till 5:30. So we're going to move to the second item on the list, which is an OTR submitted by Ann Corman, Shauna Black, myself, and Greg Mezzi, supporting communities with local arts programming. And I will let Annie take the lead on that one.
Thanks, Deborah. So this is OTR number 13 in the books, page 7 in this packet that we have. And so this is from the Community Arts Partnership supported through our tourism program, and or as far as suggested from our tourism program. This does not fall in any of our categories right now in our tourism program that we have funded through our tourism dollars, which is the room tax. So this is something that was suggested to us that it's a program that's very diverse in that it gets out to, for instance, Southside Community Center, the rural libraries. It helps provide diverse programming. It's not necessarily money that you can just say, okay, I can give this amount to this one person or this one entity. So this helps spread the programming out into the community. So I'd like to submit that. I don't know if anybody else is here that wanted to talk about it from planning, but anyway, I'd like to submit that one for discussion.
Thanks, Annie. I'd like to say that I know that that Dan Klein has expressed concern about not confusing our county funding with STPB funding. And I want to say that as I understand it, this isn't really an issue of confusing those two funding sources. As I understand it, there is a separate program that CAP administers from the state to distribute these funds. And they would like to have more funds to distribute. And STPB felt that this was not tourism related, so they didn't want to use STPB funds. I think it might be less confusing if we consider that what we're really asking for is funds to go directly to CAP to be distributed for these cultural and educational programs. And my interest in this primarily is that it's a way to enhance the ability of our rural libraries to present programming. And I've been wondering for years if there isn't some way that we could give the rural libraries additional support. So with that said, would anybody like to speak on this issue? Dan?
Thank you. Yeah, so just as a little bit of background for anyone that's listening, there is a law that enables the county to charge a room tax, a hotel tax that we do every year, and use that money for a variety of purposes, tourism purposes, arts, and supports of the arts. And that's where all the money that the county provides for supporting of the arts comes from. It's the hotel tax. It's $3.3 million this year. It's a 14% increase over pre-pandemic levels. It's an extra $400,000 than we took in 2019. And I support more arts programming for the rural libraries, and I support more money for community arts partnership. And the source of that money is very easy to find. It's right there in the hotel tax, where all the arts money that we provide comes from. We took in $400,000 more than pre-pandemic. This is asking for $132,000, so it would be very easy to provide the funding out of that source. That's where I think it should come from. And if somebody were to propose a resolution asking the Strategic Tourism Planning Board to direct an extra $132,000 for this purpose, I would definitely support that. But I cannot support taking it from property tax money when there's this whole other source of money that exists and is increasing and is intended for that purpose. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Greg?
Yeah, I apologize to my colleagues for running a few minutes behind this evening. Dan, would you be okay with taking back the unallocated revenue that the county takes out of the tourism funds to help fund the community arts partnership? Would you be in favor of voting for that? And then taking property tax funded items and paying them out of property tax rather than paying them out of room tax?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
So we take 10% right now off the top as an administrative fee, and Norma or Lisa, correct me if I'm saying any of this wrong. We use some of that funds that gets contributed to our unallocated revenue. Some goes to, I think, Rick, maybe your office for some bookkeeping. Some goes to a couple other accounts, but there's a large portion of that, maybe 90-some thousand or more, that goes to unallocated revenue, or 200,000 that goes to unallocated revenue. So right now we're taking room tax funds and we're putting them into unallocated revenue. Would you be okay with doing away with that and using that 200,000 to pay for the community arts partnership rather than taking room tax and putting them somewhere where property tax dollars should actually be paying, but we're sort of funneling from the arts to pay for property tax through that administrative fee?
No, I wouldn't be in favor of that.
That makes two of us. Anybody else? Mike and then Lee.
I know a lot of us are kind of concerned about spending, and we've got some big items here that we need to think about. One of the things that locks us into spending is when we do these one-time items over 2 or 3 years. And this one is multi-year for 2 years. I'd be willing to support this if it were 1 year. But I don't really want to do it for multi and say we're going to do it for next year. There's too many questions about what's going to happen next year out there. And I'm really worried about recession and other kinds of things. So I would move to amend the amendment to make it a 1 year.
Procedurally, I'm not sure where we are with this because nobody actually moved this
I'm sorry, I
OTR.
thought it was on the table. I withdraw my amendment then until
Do
it
we
gets on
do
the table.
this with resolutions?
Like if Annie is presenting it, she should make a motion and then there would be a second.
Okay, so I guess I screwed up here. Annie, do you want to move it?
Yes.
Okay,
Second.
and Greg seconds it. And then Mike can offer his amendment and then we can ask if it's friendly and we will proceed.
I would move to make this a 1 year, a one-time 1 year.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Lee seconds. And is that friendly to the mover and the seconder?
No.
Just to the seconder.
Okay, well, that means that we are required then to take a vote on that amendment. So now we're going to address the amendment. So I have, who wants to address the amendment? Let's put it that way. So let's start with Annie.
So I appreciate Mike's concern, and I agree that, we don't know what next year is going to bring us. And I am concerned about next year. But this OTR is 2 years. Some of us have talked about doing it for 3 years, and some of us have talked about, 2 years. And also having that concern was that each year we vote on these OTR. So this will come up for next year. We'll be voting on this next year. And if we don't think for whatever reason it's appropriate or we can't afford it, we can vote it down next year. So it's not going to be set in stone. So that's why I'm not in favor of changing it to 1 year versus 2.
Okay, thank you, Annie. So I have Mike Sigler and then Amanda.
Mine's more a question. I mean, I'm a little just confused because from what Dan just said, I mean, our organizations are going to be kind of flush with cash. I mean, $400,000 is a lot of money. I mean, we're asking for 132 and we're saying they're already going to get $400,000 more just from the room tax. So I'm confused as to why there's a push for 132,000. I mean, I don't mind 130. Listen, I don't think there's anybody here that's going to say, I want to vote against the arts. I mean, I go to a lot of shows I go to a lot of shows locally. I mean, I've gotten calls about this, but I'm confused as to when Dan is saying we're literally going to get $400,000 more, why there's a push for 132. That's my question. So,
Well, my understanding is that the STP board's approach generally is that they use STPB money for things that put heads in beds.
Mhm.
Dan has pointed out correctly that that's not a legal requirement, but that is their policy. And a lot of these programs that are supported by these monies are local cultural and educational programs that in the STPB's opinion, do not put heads in beds. They are oriented towards the edification and enrichment of our local residents. So it's not a question of how much money there is. It's a question of how STPB wants to spend it. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It's just, I do remember the study from STPB. Really, the only thing locally that I think really put heads in beds was the Science Center, to be honest with you. I mean, none of the theaters bring people in, maybe the state, but the state always was too big, kind of.
Well, that's a debate for another day.
I'm just saying, I mean, if that's the metric, we have not been following that metric for an awful long.
STPB administers that fund as it sees fit.
Well,
Okay,
no,
so I have Amanda, I have Lee, I have Randy. Did I miss anyone? Rich. And then Mike Lane.
All right, it's gonna be a long night. I would support this amendment. I think it's reasonable compromise. I also just wanted to note that Annie said that it would come back. And yes, technically, any multi-year OTRs do come back. But I've noticed over recent years that generally the county administrator approves them and says that they are a multi-year OTR, so they go in the recommended budget. And yes, we would still have the opportunity to pull it out, but I also noticed that that doesn't happen that often. Once something is in the books for a multi-year, we tend to leave it in there. So I would be up for this being a 1 year. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so Lee.
I apologize if this is more directed toward the main motion than the amendment, but it kind of all rolls together. Just 3 quick points. I'm supportive of funding going for the community for the arts. I can see where it has a benefit out in the community. The size of the request is, of course, what's troublesome to me at this point in time. I'm wondering, and I don't know that I can get an answer on this tonight, but how large a budget does the Community for the Arts work on? What impact does the 132,000 have versus their program expenses on a yearly basis? Let me leave that one open. And then the second part has to do, I know that we're voicing support for being able to put programming in the county libraries. Great idea. We've invested a lot in the libraries out in the rural communities. But again, back to the size, you're talking $132,000 request when our total support for rural libraries is $215,000. And I'm not, again, I'm not opposed to one time to see if we can promote the arts and build a program we can come back and judge in a year from now. But the size of it is a little troublesome in the context of the greater contribution out there that's for the rural libraries for existence. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, I've got Randy, Rich, Mike Lane, and Shauna, did you have your hand up? I can't tell.
Put it down. I'm fine. Thanks.
Okay, Randy.
I have a clarification question first. So is this basically taking the wages that are currently paid for out of the planning and sustainability department?
No,
I thought that's what.
that's a different,
That's the other
that's
OTR.
a different OTR. That's not what we're
That was
talking.
132,002 for some reason. Okay, that was my question. I support the libraries as well. And most for 1 year. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. Rich.
Yeah, I just note Nick Helmholt put something in the chat saying he is available, and I think he could clarify some of the questions we had in front of us. But I had a question, the movers of this OTR, why don't you want to take it out of hotel tax? What is the rationale for taking it out of general fund? If somebody could answer that.
We don't control how STPB spends the hotel tax money.
Well,
He
we
asked the
have to
movers,
approve their
I'd like to
budget.
Address that.
Well, yeah, but some of us were around the last time we tried to change their budget, and it was fecal cyclone of historic proportions.
But couldn't we take the money out of room tax and apply it? It sounds like there's plenty there.
Well, have you seen the
I'd be
budget?
glad, Ted, he asked the movers.
know.
since- Do you want us to answer
I
that?
think we should,
Yeah.
sorry, I think we should either have Nick comment on the budget, or we should all be able to look at the budget if we're going to make inferences about what their budget actually is. So I guess I would maybe ask Nick or Lisa or
Yeah.
Annie, but
Sure.
Well, Annie is the mover, certainly has the prerogative of speaking to Rich's question.
I would say that a few years ago, we got into the minutia of the STPB budget, and it was not a pretty sight, to say the least. I felt we were, it's my own opinion, I felt that we were getting into micromanaging an organization that we set up, and I trust them, and I still trust them. And so this is their recommendation, and I'll defer to Nick from our planning department, who oversees or helps us with that, to give us a little more background on this.
Okay, Nick.
I still don't understand. I mean, we're not taking anything away from the board, right? They would still make the decisions they're already making. It's just source of funds for this budget item.
No, their decision on this particular item is that it doesn't qualify for hotel tax.
Let's let Nick.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead,
Can you hear
Nick.
me? Okay, great. So yeah, so the background on this was this idea was presented to the STPB in June, shortly following the approval of the recommended 2023 budget for the tourism program. The concept here was that these are arts activities that have value, but were not really deemed to be have a close connection or a draw for visitors to the area. And while we can be, somewhat, I think, expansive in that view, there's limits to that. I think this is where that limit was. The request basically got turned into a resolution from the STPB to see if it would be possible to have the county fund some arts activities outside of the hotel room occupancy tax, recognizing that there are legitimate arts and cultural activities that don't have a meaningful influence on tourism. So I think that's how it came to be. That's the sort of origin of it. In terms of the budget, there was a question about what is the impact. This idea is to match what the Community Arts Partnership currently gets from the state of New York, the NYSCA, New York State Council on the Arts, for I believe what's called the statewide regrant program. And used to be called the decentralization program. And these are, grants that range, I think the maximum allowed by the state is up to $5,000. So this would allow us to do, quite a lot more grants through that program, and grants that would support more artists and support more communities that are applying for that. I don't have the exact numbers at my fingertips, but I recall that, typically these grants have ranged in the magnitude of, I think, $1,000 to $2,000 for events that, last for a day or a couple of days. They're relatively brief performances or events. So, yeah, I think they're, that's a little bit of the background. I hope I answered some of the questions that were hanging out there.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, I've got Mike Lane, and then I want anyone who wants to speak to something other than this proposed amendment after we vote on this, raise your hand.
Amanda made the point I wanted to make about the fact that most often multi-years are recommended.
Okay. Does anybody else want to speak to Mike's proposed amendment?
Henry has his hand.
Henry?
Yes, I just feel that if we have a recession next year, we will in fact look at OTRs more closely. So I feel that this is, I'm not going to vote and support Mike's amendment.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to address Mike's amendment? All right, so let's vote on Mike's amendment. So a yes vote would be that we would adopt Mike's amendment, and it would be only a 1-year OTR.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks, Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grannison,
No,
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
No.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
11 ayes, 3 noes. That passes.
Okay, now, who wishes to speak to the motion as it now stands for a 1-year OTR? Dan?
Well, I get the sense it's going to pass. I just want to state this for the record. Of all the monies that we administer, this is the one that has no restrictions. There is no state mandates and no federal mandates that we are dealing with here. These are our own invention. This is our fund to do with as we please. Mostly, there's, it's a little exaggeration. And so this idea that somebody decided we can't spend it in a certain way is false. It's just an invention. It's not true. And it's heads and beds. I mean, there's a bunch of things that we fund through the Strategic Tourism Planning Board that we know doesn't bring in tourism, like Dryden Dairy Day and Groton Old Home Days and Newfield Old Home Days, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of things. So it's just not true. It's just, if somebody says we can't spend it that way, it's just not true. And we, the legislature, can say, hey, you should spend it that way. And so that's, even though I think this is going to pass, that's my message to the Strategic Tourism Planning Board. Why don't you use the increase in your funding to fund this thing that you think is a priority? Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Greg?
So probably being one of the only people maybe that served on the STPB budget committee. See, I think that there are many priorities, and I think that members of the STPB, the arts community, the tourism community, take that job of allocating those funds very seriously. And there is an element in certain festivals grants and other grants that there is a quality of life factor that's taken into consideration, not just heads and beds. That is a large part of the conversation of what will create a vibrant tourism economy. But there's a piece of it that also what's going to enrich and create a more vibrant arts community for everyone in Tompkins County, both residents and visitors. So I think that is something that they do. There are competing priorities. And this was an opportunity to, make this a priority. But at some point, if you look at the budget, there's other priorities that have taken those funds, right, to fund the long established grant programs and things like that. So there was a lot of consideration about what priorities were placed, and they did place priority on that, but then they also saw this as an opportunity because this is also a mechanism within our system to ask for additional support from our organizations, right, from our departments for additional funds out of the fund balance. So we pulled that lever and made this recommendation. So that's where it comes from. It is a priority. Unfortunately, we don't have the room tax to support fully all of the priorities we have in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Sigler.
Well, I'm going to support this just because it's going to the rural libraries, to be honest with you. I
Yeah,
mean,
me too.
the rural libraries, great, they're getting more money. But I have to tell you that at the end of the year, I'm going to look at it and say how much actually went to the rural libraries. And if it wasn't where we say it's going to be, then I won't really understand the point of this, right? So, so great, go rural libraries, because I've always felt we've kind of underfunded that anyway. And I'm actually putting, like, I would suggest that next year's budget, if we're going to suggest this again, we kind of put it all underneath that.
For programming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just put it under that line item in the budget. We don't have to break it out as a whole separate thing.
Let us hope that next year we're looking at a more optimistic macroeconomic outlook.
It's all a matter of how you look at it, Deborah. Come on, positive energy, man.
Uh-huh. Okay, Randy?
Based on what Dan said, I agree with you, Dan, if that's the case. It sounds like it is. I think rural funding for libraries is great. The towns that don't have libraries, are they left in the cold? I guess that's my question. A lot of them don't have libraries. So I just wonder about that. And also look at funding overall for libraries. And I think Lee mentioned it was a 3% increase to 200 something. And our library is looking at 11% increase. So I look at those things. But more importantly for me, I look at our fund balances before you can make any decision on how much money we have. We have to know what our fund balances are. And we know what they were at the end of 21, but we don't know what they are now. So did we increase our fund balance? Did we lower our fund balance? That's important to me to know before we decide to spend money. So.
Norma, do you want to address the fund balance question? Or Rick can? I mean, the only audited fund balance.
No, well, I mean, we don't have, I didn't prepare the projection for 2022. There's a lot of factors that take place. We still have a couple of months left of the year. So it's really hard. We don't usually have a fund balance, a real idea of a fund balance until into the 13th period, which would be after the first of the year. So, but the fund balance what we're working with right now is the available fund balance is somewhere around 25 million. That's correct.
So, but I don't understand that. And I realize it's complicated. But money comes in, money goes out. So, and you have a budget for every month and your money goes out in a month. And so it seems to me like it's not, and in business, you just don't work that way. I mean, you know, every month what's going on. So how can you make a decision for the following year if you don't know where you are now? I mean, I guess that's the way government runs, but it's going to take me a while to learn that. So.
Go ahead.
So there's part of what we have, what Rick's department deals with all the time is there's funding coming in from the state, there's funding coming in from the federal government, there's grant funding coming in, there's expenditures going out. The revenues are not necessarily coming in at the same time because we banked on that money to come in, but it's not necessarily here. So if we were to give you a number right now, it's not a true picture because we don't have necessarily all of the revenues collected at this point. And there's expenditures that are encumbered that, I mean, I know when Rick looks at his numbers, he's taking all of that into consideration, but there's also encumbrances that are planned expenses but have not been spent yet. Okay.
We do the best we can. And after a couple of years, you'll be used to the idea that it takes you a while to get to an exact number, but the approximate numbers based on the audited results from 2021 are pretty reliable. So, okay. I've got Travis and then Lee.
This is just a question for clarity. Greg, maybe you can help me out. I heard Dan say that there's more money, there's 400,000, it could be used differently, right? You're saying that that money's already accounted for, and this is 132,000 on top of that? Is that,
So the STPB Budget Committee has submitted their budget as it's been prepared. So I would turn to Nick because going through this process to remember the other budget committee back from June, I'd be struggling and pulling numbers out without having it in front of me. But yes, we did go through and the part of that process is to allocate the revenues that comes in. The 400,000 increase was from 2019, correct, Dan? That's where you got that figure? If you look at the 2021 actuals to what the budget is for 2023, it's not a $400,000 jump. Dan's comment about 400,000 was from pre-pandemic funding is a $400,000 jump.
Okay.
So I would ask Nick, if you have further questions, I would definitely want Nick to weigh in on what the allocations were or what's available. Because there's, to my knowledge, there's, other than our own policy of, funding, fund balances and things like that, there's not surplus additional funds. I
Okay.
think Nick's on mute.
Yeah, I don't know if Nick wants or needs to weigh in, but he's welcome to do so if he
I
wishes.
think basically what Greg said is accurate, that the budget projection for 2023 has been fully allocated and is in your overall budget of as a part of the proposal that came from STPB. This is an addition to that. The OTR is as its abbreviation means, is over target beyond what that is in the. So there's not like unprogrammed funds in the 2023 tourism program budget.
Thanks, Nick. Lee?
Just briefly, and this is to kind of echo a little bit of what Randy brought forward. And Narma, I just go back in time a little bit with the budget. And I do remember, as a veteran of a couple of those things with over target requests, that when the over target discussions came forward, there was usually a spreadsheet that the board was watching that showed what the effect of each of these votes was as we moved along. And that was factored in by the proposed budget from the county administrator, which took into account the fund balances and gave us a projected tax rate and rate per thousand and based on what the median housing value was. So I know that in years past, there was a little bit of a guide that kind of provided the legislature with some assessment of what the impact of each individual discussion was. And again, I'm not asking for that now. I think it would be difficult for you to do.
We received these materials this afternoon. Did you get them?
I haven't opened them. Okay.
Well, this basically, as I understand it, tells us what the impact is on the tax levy and on fund balance based not only on Lisa's proposed budget, but also if all of our OTRs were approved.
And that's what I was looking for. And thank you. And in the years past, it was projected as we talked along. To keep
Those
it
are
right
the
in front
days
our
of
mind.
Kevin Lee.
Very
We're
good.
moving along. Okay.
Thank you.
We have now spent 35 minutes on this. And I would ask if we are ready to vote. Okay, looks like we are.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
yes?
Randy Brown,
No.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grannison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
No.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes. Thank
12
you.
ayes, 2 noes.
What was the vote?
Doing it.
12
was
ayes,
announcing.
2 noes.
Okay, I am advised that Mr. Talbot from TC3 is now with us. Bill, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let's go back to Mike Lane's OTR relating to TC3. Mike, if you'd like to explain this and then move it.
Sure. And I certainly defer to Norma and Bill on this, but the problem, as I understand it, when we had this as target funding, it would have added to what we pay our percentage for the college's support. But we can't do that by ourselves. We have to do it in conjunction with Cortland. They have to do it. And yet we want to be able to help the college here. So it was suggested that we make this a 3-year, multi-year. And that's what I have proposed to amend it to, so we don't have an issue with Cortland County. Norma or Bill, did I say that right?
You did very well.
Thank you.
So to clarify, is this something that we need to do and something that TC3 wants us to do?
Yes. TC is requesting it.
Okay,
It's the same amount of money. It's just changing how we designate it.
will it not also change where the money comes from? Yes, so this will be coming out of the general fund and not out of target. All right. That said, I want to be sure I understand that the costs that are covered by this $145,000 a year are expected to be annual costs, and they're not going to be going away anytime soon.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, Bill. All right, does anybody want to second Mike's motion? Annie seconds. Any discussion? Oh, goody. Okay, looks like we're ready to vote.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grannison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff. Stepped away. Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Jean Eyes, passes.
All right, thank you. And thank you for being available to us, Bill.
Thank you. So
I'm glad
appreciate
was short and sweet.
it. Me too. Thank you.
Okay. All right, now we're moving on to 2 OTRs that I submitted. Am I allowed to move as chair? Britt, Sabrina? Okay. All right then. So the first one is an OTR to add back into Target the additional 5% of TCAT's underwriter request for the year. Apparently, they initially requested 8%, and Lisa recommended.
Originally, we put 3% into the budget for all supported agencies and when we met with them, that was the number that we were going on. It was after we had submitted our recommended budget that they came back and asked for the 8%. So it wasn't included in my recommendation. It was just a timing issue essentially.
Oh, okay. So this would be the full 8% that they're requesting from each underwriter to cover their operating budget for the year. I will move that if someone would, and Veronica seconds. I do want to clarify one thing because I'm not sure of this. Is this like TC3 where if we want to put the 8% in, it still depends on whether the other 2 underwriters put the 8% in as well?
I think it is. On the TCAP bylaws, they have to be funded equally from each underwriter. There may be some way to, just like we do with TC3, to give extra. I don't know how that would work.
Well, because I was going to suggest that if that's the case, we could put that money in contingent funds. And when we know what the other two underwriters are going to be doing, then it will be there to cover that cost if the other two agree to it as well. Mike?
This is not the first time this kind of a question that you're asking, Deborah, has come up, and it's who's going to go first on these very often? And usually it comes out, we have to go first. Now, if Cornell and the city, let's say, only wanted to go 6%, then I think we'd have to meet and maybe we would have to reduce our amount, or they'd have to raise theirs. But it is that same kind of an issue, and it's not the first time we've questioned it.
Well, I think given the relatively small amount of money, I would expect the other two underwriters will pony up, but sometimes I'm more optimistic than I should be. Anyhow, so that's the substance of this OTR. Does anybody have comments, questions, discussion? Annie?
So I'm just and Ed, going off what you said, you asked about, do we need to put this in contingent fund? Was that question exactly answered, or?
Not exactly. What?
Can anybody answer that?
I think you could do it if there was a problem with the other two, then we could probably amend it later on and just put the extra money there until it was sorted out.
So we don't need to put it in contingent fund?
I think not just yet.
Do we know what TCAT asked of the other two sponsoring agencies?
No, I'm sure they asked for the same thing they asked for from us. They have to.
Okay, so is that the 3% or that the 8%?
The 8%. As Lisa explained, she had just automatically put in 3%.
Okay.
And then they came back and said, no, we need 8. So yeah, that's where we are. Okay, anybody else?
And so did Lisa approve the 8%?
Well, it wasn't in my recommended budget solely due to the timing issue that they came back and asked for the 8% after I'd submitted the recommended budget. So now it's up to the legislature to determine. I mean, yeah. So, but it's what they're asking for their maintenance of effort essentially for 2023. So.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? We ready to vote?
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grannison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff, Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, and the next one also relates.
This isn't a substantive comment. I just wanted to bring people's attention to, this is the database that Lee was speaking about, that as we go along and the legislature's actions are taken into account, you can see the change in the projected tax levy and the fund balance. So I just wanted to make people aware of.
You have the lights dimmed?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to read that. Can you make it bigger, Norma?
I was trying to.
Okay.
It wouldn't zoom.
Okay.
That's better. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, this is cool, real time. All right, so the next one is also a TCAT related request, and I will move this. This was a request that they made for capital contributions from the 3 underwriters. It wasn't clear to me whether initially their request was for a target or an OTR. But I think given the period of transition that we're going through and that TCAT has to deal with in its industry, I'm just recommending this as a 3-year, multi-year OTR. If someone would be willing to second it, we can discuss. Dan seconds. Okay, questions? Mike Lane.
Can we do less than 3 years?
I would have to defer to Dan or Lisa because they're on the board. What's your sense from TCAT's side?
It wasn't clear to me whether this was, as you mentioned, an ongoing request to be target or one time. So I don't have that information to go on. I think certainly it could be less than 3 years.
Okay, I'm sorry I missed some other hands. Veronica.
Just real quick clarification question. In the budget book, the unrecommended OTR was for $95,249. And in our little OTR packet, it says $92,249.
I think that might have been a typo either on my part or probably on my part. So it's 95,000. Thanks for pointing that out. Somebody's reading closely.
That made gold star.
Those math skills.
Anybody else before Mike makes his anticipated offer to amend?
I want to ask, is there anybody from TCAT here? I can't see everybody on the screen right now.
It doesn't seem so. Mike?
I will move to make it 1 year.
Okay.
And don't forget, we could always re-amend this in the budget process later on if we had to. If this, for example, this isn't our only voting session and we can make amendments right to the day that we adopt the budget.
Okay. Does anybody want to second that? Okay, Rich. Who wants to, okay, I guess the question is that friendly or not friendly? I mean, I guess given the indeterminate nature of TCAT's initial request, I can't necessarily view this as unfriendly. And they are certainly going through a period of rapid transition. And the economy is just so uncertain. I guess I wouldn't fight this if it would get them the funding they need for next year. Rich, you were my seconder, so.
I seconded. I have no objection. to the
Oh,
amendment.
I'm sorry.
No
Dan.
objection to the amendment either.
Okay, thank you. Amanda?
Yeah, just a clarification on the friendly amendment. If it's friendly to the mover and the seconder, but anyone else can say it's not friendly, and then we would have a vote. So if it's not friendly to you, you should speak up and then we can have a vote.
Okay, is it not friendly to anyone? We're so amenable. Isn't it wonderful? Okay, so discussion. Doesn't appear to be any. All right, then, I guess we're ready to vote.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Point of order. We're
Dan?
voting on the main motion. It just.
Right, right.
So that's now been amended. and
It's
we're
now
voting on
been
the main-
amended.
Just wanted to be clear.
Friendly amendment.
Thank you.
okay, Shauna was yes. Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff, Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
13 eyes.
Thank you. Thank you all. And now we will move on to the next OTR, which is Shauna Black's OTR relating to OTR number 72. Shauna, you want to discuss this?
Yeah, if I could go ahead and move this, I wanted to bring this forward because initially whenever we were told about this contract position, it was rolled off as a short-term position in order to train our new purchasing staff. And I noticed that it is recommended in the budget along with the addition of another purchasing staff. And I did speak with Ruby and she said that it was in fact supposed to be temporary. So I would like to, for us to move forward with hiring the permanent person and no longer use a contract service.
Is that a second, Randy? Thank you. Discussion, questions? Dan?
So I remember this at the budget session and I was confused about it. So I could use some clarification. Is there, did we hire someone? Are they doing that purchasing job now? Rick, anything else you wanted to add? I would like to hear.
Yeah, my staff has prepared a little presentation here because we started this with Jason Molino when we started talking about a contractual person to help out train a new purchasing person. And what your budget before you now that comes with county administrator's recommendation is the hiring of a second purchasing specialist, but still continuing on with the consulting service and the additional work that they provide to our purchasing department till we get that staff member up and running also. So I shared, Joyce has put together some stats and some information. If you pass those down through, you do the other side. And what the O2R represents on the summary page, it says multi-year. That's incorrect. It's a one-time, if you look in your budget book, section 4, page 82, it's a one-time $32,000 contract extension. And it is also funded with ARPA funding. So removing this from your budget wouldn't impact the tax levy one way or another, good or bad. And so I would like to introduce Joyce. If you come to the microphone, she's prepared this analysis to share with you what each of them are doing now as we approach what will be the busiest time of the year. You have to remember in January and February is when we get the most bids and the most requests from departments to do bid packages because it's beginning of the year. And so I'm going to let her take it away with her comments and you can review the summary sheet with the statistics on it.
Hi, I'm sorry if I appear nervous because I am. I haven't spoken in front of a group like this in a long time.
You're among friends, don't worry.
I just wanted to say that, as you can see from the handout, the purchasing division has been very busy in 2022. We still have 3 months to go and we're well over our numbers from previous years. We've doubled our number of bids. And I think we're on the pace of like 50% more of our purchase orders as well. The number of bid stations, I am sorry, I just already told you all that. But the number of bids also increases the workload of getting them posted in every location that needs to be, the websites, the required locations that they have to post, the legal notices. There's lots of bits and pieces that goes to a bid other than just doing the bid, along with the prep work and the post work. I'm asking for you to, that was submitted and recommended by Lisa to be approved, because by eliminating this request, it would be detrimental to my success and the success of my department, or my division, I should say. Because we've been trying really hard to get everybody up to compliance with doing, following procedures, following what the requirements for our procurement program. And it's hard to do that if you don't have enough staff. And we're starting to work very cohesively and in a timely manner, people are getting serviced the way they should be getting serviced. And I'm afraid that if we take this away, I not only will lose the knowledge that I could be gaining from somebody who's very expert in this, whether it happens to be our current consultant or another consultant. I'm afraid we're going to go backwards. We're going to go back to where they weren't being serviced the way it should be and compliance wasn't being upheld. And then due to the increases mentioned above that I've talked about, we're just beginning to feel that. And I've got off pace because I didn't want to go by script. I should have gone by script. But without the support in 2023, we're going to default and requests won't be fulfilled in a timely manner that we're currently doing and have strived to obtain. We work really hard at trying to get things done timely and to work with departments and divisions so that they feel like we're approachable and they can come to us and we can help them through the process rather than just say, you got to do this, you got to do that. We're very our efforts are to train them and to help let them know what they need to do to fulfill requirements of their procurement policy along with New York state requirements. So I guess that's kind of it. I know it sounds crazy. I've had them for a year, but I only have them 3 days a week. So it's time sensitive when I do have them, and the additional workload that we've picked up on. I honestly have not had enough time to learn what I need to learn from him going forward, and also transition with a new position and train them as well. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay, questions? Randy?
Just for clarity, so a new position, additional position in the purchasing department has been funded for 2023?
Correct.
Yes.
It has not been hired yet.
No.
No.
Anyone else? Shauna?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that I understand. Joyce, thank you for coming to speak with us. I know it's not easy, and I promise we'll be kind to you tonight. So you've been in the position for a year, and whenever we hired the consultant, the whole idea was that the consultant would train you to be able to do the job. So has that has not been happening?
Shauna, it has been happening, but on a lot slower pace than what I thought was anticipated. And it's due to the workload that's been on us this year. We just haven't had time to spend and it also is situational learning as well. Like it depends on the bids that come across as to what's required and what's not required. And Jim has that knowledge that I don't have, and to know as to what method we have to go forward with and the steps that need to be taken. And you have to sometimes wait until that happens to be in front of you to be able to learn that. So it's been a combination of a lot of different things. Jim has been very supportive in showing me things when we've had the allotted time. But when you only have 3 days a week and multiple things to do and discuss within those 3 days, it's been time consuming.
Okay, so I guess the question, I guess for Rick, since he's the director at this point, could Jim focus on doing that training the first three months of the year, knowing that we're going to have a new person hop on board? And Joyce, are you able to learn the first three months of the year so that we can get you up and trained? Because quite honestly, I can't imagine that we've really offered more than a year of training to any one of our staff. And we want you to be successful and offer you all the tools and training needed. But I don't know how much longer we can continue to hire a consultant to do that, year upon year.
I'll take that. The guess is that we put in the most for this contractual position at 32,000. We did an average of what the consultant has drawn since inception until now, and it averages right at $32,000 annualized, or $32,000 a year. And it's very fortunate for us because that person basically works approximately 3 days a week. There are some weeks that person isn't working for Tompkins County at all. And there's other times that person is here, like on a Friday, if we know there's an important bid or two that person has to be here. They arrange to be here, just like any other consultant. The great savings to Tompkins County is we pay no fringe benefits for this. We pay no vacation or sick time. And we're really maximizing and getting a great bang for our buck, service for the dollar. And I agree with Shauna that we will maximize that first 3 months of the new year to get Joyce fully trained, and then perhaps a little bit while longer as they bring in the new purchasing specialist. We're not quite certain when we can hire that person. It's in the budget to be hired the first of next year, but you know how hirings go here. It's hard to find people for key positions. But that's the game plan, is to phase the consultant out somewhere during the year with the maximum amount, not to exceed 32,000, possibly a lot less if that person is gone come June of next year, or even as early as March 31st of next year. So those are great observations, and our plan was never to keep that consultant on any longer, but we're looking to continue the training for Joyce. And you can see what the workload has been in the stat sheet that she provided, that green sheet of paper. And we're hoping that the new purchasing specialist can be hired sometime during the first 2-3 months of the next fiscal year.
You know what, Deborah, based on that, I would actually like to change that OTR and reduce the amount by half of the 32. So have it be 16 so that we can fund that position for 6 months.
Okay, let's see, who's the seconder? Randy, you're friendly with that? Okay.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yeah, I've got a line of people that
Okay.
have questions. So I've
Okay.
grabbed Amanda, Rich, and Henry.
Joyce, first, thanks again for making that presentation. I know it's not always the most enjoyable to speak in front of us. This is really helpful too, to put this together. And Rick, I appreciate the explanation. I would second what Shauna says. I know it doesn't need a second because it was already seconded, but that was my thought, was, try to put a cap on this. I don't like to over sandbag things and sort of plan for the worst. I think we should plan for what we think we'll need and sort of stick to that. So that's why I would be in support of the 15K, but I really just wanted to make sure, Joyce, you got a shout out again, because I appreciate you coming and making the presentation.
I guess first I should ask, as Amanda suggests, is this change to Shauna's OTR friendly to everyone? Does anyone object to it? Okay, let's vote on the amendment. So a yes would be to reduce this to a minus 16,000 as opposed to a minus 32.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks. Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grannison,
No.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
No.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
No.
Greg Menzie,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Sher,
No.
Mike Sigler,
No.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
9 ayes, 5 noes.
Okay, so we will go back to
I'm
the,
sorry, point of order. Can you just make it clear for anybody watching that whether something is passing or not passing?
Sorry,
Okay.
9
Or
ayes,
somebody-
5 noes. That
9
passes.
ayes. Yeah.
I understand it, but I just want to make sure that everybody does.
Okay, Amanda?
Well, I was actually going to say what Shauna just said and try to make that amendment. So that's happy. I guess I don't really have anything else to add. I do think that it's a little confusing why it's taken a year already of training, and I'm not sure we really provide that much training to all of our staff. So I think, cutting this in half, and with the idea of really focusing on getting this training done in the first half of the year. You've got another person coming on, so you'll have, you've got one person there. You're also going to have staffing for the director's retirement. You're also getting another person as well. I know they all do different jobs. Everyone has variety, but you are getting plenty of new staffing going forward. So I think I'm comfortable with where this is at. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I have Rich and then Henry.
Rick actually answered my question, but I would just say that this is a very technical area of our governing process, and I'm very comfortable that we're doing enough training. I want us to be well-trained in this area, and whatever it takes. It sounds like the 16 is going to be enough, and that's why I voted for that
Point
amendment.
of order.
Yes.
I think, as Dan pointed out, I think we just voted on the main motion because it was a friendly amendment. So.
No,
No, no, no.
Oh,
That was.
that's right. Mike said, let's have a vote.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Okay,
Yes.
Sorry.
sorry.
So, point of order, sorry. What did we, point of clarification, what did we just vote on then?
We voted on the $16,000
to change it to 6.
to change it to
And that's
six.
what it is now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I didn't-
And I was making such great comments.
I know, sorry, Rich.
You were being profound, Rich.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good use of government money to make sure we have proper training in our purchasing department. So thanks.
Okay, Henry?
Yes, I mean, I think that the most important thing was Rick's comment that this comes from ARPA funding. This does not come from our budget. And so I'm not sure why we cut the amount and why we are concerned about this funding. It doesn't come from us. And so it's essentially free training. And so I will vote against it. Thanks.
Okay. Let me just say that when the ARPA funding was given to us, it became our money. And when we spend it on one option, it means that we don't have it to spend on another option. So I feel that we're obligated to husband the ARPA resources just as we husband everything else. There is one thing I'd like to say about this. Looking at this stat sheet that was presented, it looks like our contractor has been doing a lot of substantive work over and above actually training. And what I personally would like to see going forward is that most, if not all, of his efforts go towards training, not doing the actual work. So just my thoughts. Worth what you paid for him. Okay, anything else? Are we ready to vote? Okay, this is to reduce the funding to $16,000. That's what you're voting on.
It's to approve $16,000 of spending is.
No.
Well, no, because Lisa recommended 32.
Didn't we
So
already do that with the amendment? Didn't we reduce it by 16?
no, we reduced Shauna's proposal to eliminate 32,000 to a proposal to eliminate 16. Man, it's a good thing we're not accountants, isn't
But
it?
the net
Jeez.
effect is 16,000 will be in the budget.
Yes, sir.
for that.
That's the net
Thank
effect.
you. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to vote?
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grannison,
No,
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
No.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
No.
Mike Sigler,
No.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
10 ayes, 4 noes. That passes.
Thank you. Okay, rolling right along. The next one we have is another OTR from Shauna Black to add 2 deputies to the Tompkins County Sheriff's Office. Shauna, I'll let you address this and move it. And I assume, is somebody from the Sheriff's Office, is Derek here or Jen?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shauna.
Hi, thank you. In speaking with our sheriff, it appears that, gotta make sure I'm not on mute. It appears that the sheriff's department's receiving more calls, particularly on the swing shift. And by adding 2 deputies, it would allow them to have four deputies on a swing shift where they're receiving the majority of calls. So that is the OTR that I would like to present.
Can we get a second, please? Travis, thank you.
Also, just one clarification, the amount that I came up was not using the higher rate. I used the higher rate there and then added fringes. So the amount that I did quote was going to be more than we actually need for that first year.
Well, Shauna, this is a little bit confusing in as much as some of it was going to come out of Target and some of it was going to come out of the general fund. So,
yeah,
I mean,
I can explain that too. So in order for us to slide this into our budget, I thought that it would make sense to actually have half of it come out of Target and then half of it come out of fund balance. And then next year, all of it would come out of Target.
okay, so this 236,476, is that the first year?
The first year, half of that's going to come out of Target, half of it's going to come out of fund balance.
Okay. All right, comments, questions, Rich?
Yeah, I think I see the rationale here. I'm just curious. I'd feel more comfortable if this had gone before public safety, but the committee has not considered this. So I'm wondering why we're doing it this way, Shauna.
Well, this is the OTR process and it's member filed. Whenever I look at every single one of the member files, none of them have actually gone before committee. So I guess I'm wondering what your question is.
Oh, we're talking about spending 236,000, but just overall staffing is something that we do consider at committee. And this is a pretty significant spend. I would have liked to heard from the sheriff in some detail on this, whether this is what he believes. I mean, obviously I'm sure he'd be happy to get the staff. Is he with us tonight?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Yeah, Derek, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, first, thanks, Shauna, for reaching out and talking to me about this and putting it forward. And Rich, to your question, I'm always careful when I ask for staff. I know it's costly, and I'm always cognizant of how the best that the sheriff's office can serve our community. And I'm certainly very thankful for the staffing support we've already received. There's no doubt everybody has invested a lot in my office. There's also no doubt that the demand on the sheriff's office has increased significantly, especially over the last few years. One thing Shauna asked me about when she reached out to me was overtime, and we're always very careful with our overtime. We've always tried to come in under budget on that, and and when you look at the overtime, I want to remind people, if you're looking at it from a financial perspective and the fact that this could help lower some overtime costs, you always got to remember to subtract the revenue that comes in from a lot of our overtime details as well, because a lot of that is reimbursed. But also, if you look at this from a wellness perspective, nothing weighs on our deputies more than racing the calls across our county, which is rather large, rushing our interactions with the community, being faced with limited backup opportunities, and just the overall sense of busyness at times, especially during our evening shift. And as I've reported to everybody multiple times, we routinely have just 3 deputies and a supervisor on the road at any given shift. Sometimes we're lucky and have 4. But the days of that are really gone, and they've been long gone. For the community, looking at it that way, this goes a long way, and hopefully lowering our response times, filling all our patrol zones. We got 4 zones. Usually one goes unfilled. Caroline and Danby rarely see a deputy at any time. And this also will hopefully open up more opportunities for us to be more proactive in our response and increase our community engagement even further. We also know we get support from the New York State Police. That's often brought up, and they're a huge ally to my office, no doubt. But they don't have the same community focus locally like the sheriff's office would. It's hard to get info from them. I have you guys often reaching out to me for complaints that are often handled by the state police. We can't get any information, nothing shared. They're not committed to the same model of policing that's valued by us in our community. 2 was asked for and discussed amongst us because when taking in account days off and benefit time that's used, 2 would be what would be needed to bump up 1 shift to a minimum, by a minimum of 1 at any given time. I'm hoping you can support this. I know it's a big ask, but I also feel we're doing a lot of great things in the community, and I'm excited to see the potential for growth. And the money would certainly be well spent, in my opinion.
Thanks, Sheriff. If I could follow up, would some of the resources you have here, would any of it be supporting the Ithaca Police Department? Because it seems like they're in a real staffing crisis. Would you be in a position to be able to provide more backup in that direction?
Depends what the level of that backup would be. I know the sheriff's office, or I'm sorry, IPD is in a staffing crunch as well. But I'd remind you that on their worst day, they have twice the people we have in the county, and twice the budget, as a matter of fact. We would continue to support them whenever we could. There's a lot going on in the city as well. We back them up routinely now, and nothing like that would ever change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this one is popular. I've got Mike Lane, Veronica, Amanda, Greg, Annie, and Henry. So, Mike.
Yeah, I'm supportive of staffing our sheriff's department. They're a major source of police protection for a huge part of my district. What I'm trying to understand is the funding here, Shauna, with this split. And I'm wondering, and maybe this is for Derek, but is it going to be harder to hire deputies? I know it's already hard right now. It's going to be harder without making this 100% target. Should we just go for 1, for example, instead of 2 and make it all target?
I'm not sure, Mike, if you're asking me the answer to that as far as the way it's funded. I don't think I'd be the best one to ask. I can say the problem we would run into would just, if you're asking me about just providing 1 extra deputy, it probably wouldn't be enough. I know it wouldn't be enough to bump our shift minimums up when you take into account, again, the days off that they have 2 days a week and then any benefit time. It just wouldn't work.
Mike, do you have a follow-up to that, or are you done?
No, I was kind of hoping Shauna would speak to the split.
Yeah, I'm happy to make it all go to target. My concern is that I really didn't want to affect the tax levy. I wanted to do as least damage to that as possible. But I would be open to funding sources if there are other ideas out there.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it's either target or it's not target. I don't know that we've.
That's why I went for half.
Yeah, go to someone else. I'm still
Okay.
pondering all this.
All right, Veronica.
Thank you. I've got a question and a comment. I guess first the question for about overtime. It says the addition of deputies could have the benefit of reducing overtime. And then Sheriff, you also mentioned something about changing overtime revenues. Can you, I guess either you or Shauna, explain what should we expect financially in terms of reducing overtime if we did approve this OTR? And I apologize, can you explain the overtime revenue thing? Because I don't
Yeah,
what that's referring to.
Sure, Veronica. The point I was trying to make with overtime is it's easy to just look at our overtime line or what is spent on overtime over the course of a year and think, wow, that's higher than it should be, perhaps. But you have to take into account of a lot of the special details we have, contracts we set up with people in the community. They pay for that overtime. So we have revenue generated from that. One big one, for example, would be grassroots. That used to be shared with the state police, but now the sheriff's office is handling that event all by ourselves, which is very taxing. We enter into a contract with them. They pay the overtime back to the sheriff's office through our budget to compensate for that. So I was just trying to make the point that, you know, you kind of have to subtract that from the overtime expense if you're looking at overtime strictly from a financial perspective.
Okay, thank you. So if I understand right, some of the, like, because of these special events, some of the expenditure dollars we see in the overtime line really go hand in hand with the revenue dollars we see somewhere.
Yeah,
Other
and
revenues.
that's correct. Yeah, and the point you were, or the question you were asking about lowering overtime, you know, due to the busyness and the staffing we have, a lot of times people are have to stay over to help another deputy or things like that. There's the possibility that this could help in that area. Right offhand, that would be a very difficult number for me to come up with. I probably never could come up with it to explain or come up with an actual dollar figure on how much could potentially be saved.
Right. Yeah, I imagine that's hard to figure out or to anticipate. Thank you. And then I guess my comment for everyone holistically on this is I appreciate the work the sheriff's office does and that the workload has increased. And, you know, I'm certainly glad that it's our sheriff's office doing much of the policing in the county as opposed to like many other less community-minded police services. But if we're looking at how to respond to increased calls, I am not really in support of hiring more sheriff's deputies. I would rather, and I know there's other pieces in the budget that do this, look at like what is causing these calls in the first place. For example, I know we've got some like requests in for funding more outreach workers, for funding a like mental health joint response team, which itself, by the way, is an OTR that about hiring another deputy. I think there's already yet another OTR. There's like 3 OTRs hiring more deputies, and I realize the work is getting broken up, but I think that especially if we're thinking about planning long-term, I would like that our budget to look like further upstream of the issues that cause people to call the sheriff's department so that instead of you know, so that we can hopefully reduce them in the future. And I realize that that is like difficult in the meantime, but I think that's more of a long-term solution. And I'll, you know, hopefully remember to mention this when we come to those other requests. I'd also like to point out that even without this OTR, the looking at the department net local line for the sheriff's office, I'm not including the jail. We're already requesting, the recommended budget already includes a 15.3% increase in funding for the sheriff's office, which is more than double the average percent increase across the whole budget. So I, you know, as stated, this is quite a lot of extra money and I do not plan to support it.
Thank you. Amanda.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess I would just reiterate something I said earlier that, I mean, while we can call this a multi-year, once it's in there, I mean, if it's in there for 1 year, we're not going to say we're not doing it next year and then fire those people we just hired. So I think you might as well just go ahead and call it target. I mean, it seems like that's the assumption that this is going to be in there going forward. I guess I just, it feels like a really big ask, and this is the process. This is the time for us to bring forward anything that legislators hope for. I'm a little concerned that Derek didn't come to us, that the sheriff's office didn't come to us in the regular process. I mean, this is the regular process, but through Lisa and that budget, I know that every department would love to have more staff, and we just talked through the finance department wanting more staff, or having consultant staff. I guess I feel maybe a lot like Veronica. I would love to be able to give everybody in every department 2 more staff to do so much work that needs to be done. I guess I just don't know if I can support this right now. I guess I kind of maybe wish we could put it off till the end and wait and see what does the rest of the budget look like. And then if it makes sense in terms of, the tax levy. I don't know. Sorry, I'm just rambling, but I have some concerns. So I guess I don't really have a question. Thanks.
Thank you. Annie?
Thank you. First off, I just want to respond a little bit to what my colleague Rich John said about wishing this had gone through committee or something like that. And, there is an OTR in here asking for a grant writer through planning that didn't come through a committee. But so I was trying to think of that, but this to me in a way is a little different, that this is that was for a specific purpose, the grant writer, but this is adding 2 more to the sheriff's department for road patrol. And so, yeah, I guess I'm having a hard time, as Amanda was saying, like wondering why we're talking about this now. And I'm trying to write notes and I'm not getting a really clear message or justification of what these 2 additional staff people could do. That it says, I had written down, this would probably not decrease the shift minimums that people would be doing, but somehow maybe this would lessen the strain on the sheriff's department or certain the deputies. So I guess I'm asking for something. Clarity. Thank you.
I think probably Derek would be the one that could provide that clarity.
Sure. Thanks, Ann, for the question. I think what I was trying to explain, and perhaps didn't do a great job at it, the way our union contract is set up right now, how this ever happened or got in the contract, I have no idea. But we have to approve time off down to 3 deputies. So that causes quite a strain where oftentimes we only have 3 deputies on the road. I'm working with the union to try to establish an MOU that if we can increase the staffing, we can bump that minimum up to 4, or like Shauna mentioned, address this through a swing shift that I could get around an MOU with and target extra deputies on the time that we're most busy. That is how it would improve the staffing. I think you mentioned with the 3, that it would increase the 3 during our busiest times to a minimum of 4 due to that swing shift. I hope that makes sense.
I guess it's kind of like a chicken or the egg first, like if we don't have that MOU, then would we still, be down to 3 frequently? And I thought this was addressed a couple of years ago when we approved 2 people or 2 staff that were going to like take turns with different shifts and help with that ratio. And their, I don't remember their exact titles, but they were focused more on community education. And that was supposed to help, but they were going to be available to be able to be pulled out into the community as needed.
Yeah, in the past, we created positions for 2 extra deputies to be on that swing shift for other reasons due to staffing, and the shortage of staff. If you recall, we lost a third of our patrol force. We've just gotten our numbers back up there. That was never instituted. There was no way that people weren't there. We didn't even have enough to fill our 3 main shifts. So yeah, this would increase that swing shift up. If we can get to the level where we have everybody on board, to have a total of 4 people on that swing shift. And then, of course, with people taking time off, that would, of course, at times reduce that swing shift due to days off in benefit time. So overall, that would have the effect of having a minimum of 4 people during our busiest times.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Henry?
Yes, Derek, how many, in terms of your staffing now, how many people are out on leave or are eligible but are not working?
We have one that has been out on long-term disability that retires November 1st. We have a second person that is out on long-term disability, expected not to ever return. We have one on administrative leave facing termination. And we have 2 others that are assigned to special details that come off of our road complement. So our total road complement right now is 26, minus those people that are out due to various reasons.
Unknown caller.
Okay, I know that,
More on long-term disability as well.
excuse me?
We have an additional person just that recently just went out on long-term disability, and we don't know if they're going to be able to return.
Thanks.
Okay, I know that part of your process is to lower overtime, and we've hired more deputies over the last couple of years. Have you been able to significantly lower the overtime amounts?
Eric's on mute.
I'm sorry. Up until the point COVID hit and we had severe staff shortages, we significantly lowered overtime. If you recall, I think $100,000 was pulled from our budget, which included overtime and various other lines just to help with COVID response. So we've seen over the years through managing our people, the overtime slowly go down each and every year up until this past year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Okay, I've got Rich and then Greg.
Yeah, just going back, Shauna, I didn't mean to say that you couldn't bring an OTR, but it just seems like there's lots of complications here because of all of the questions surrounding staffing and overtime and everything else. This might be a really good idea, but it's so complicated. And I think that's why several of us are asking questions. I would offer, if we could put this aside, I would be willing to try to schedule a special meeting of the Public Safety Committee, perhaps an hour earlier than our next expanded budget committee, and go into this in more detail and try to make sure we understand it and can support it.
Well, that would certainly be up to the mover and the seconder.
Certainly. I just wanted to make the offer.
Okay. Shauna, you want to address that?
I don't know. We've never done that before. I don't think we've ever had a topic that we've done that for. I'm going to say let's, yeah, I'll take you up on that, Rich.
Okay.
I think that's,
and while we have the clerks here, I think our next is the 11th.
yeah, I think
Is there
so.
anything in chambers? Oh,
We have budget committee right before that meeting.
Deborah, how long do you think budget is going to go?
Well,
Regular
it
budget.
depends how long you're going to palaver there, Rich.
But regular budget before expanded budget, would there be a gap?
I haven't seen the agenda, but I suspect that right now, since we're in the midst of budget season, the actual committee agendas are fairly slim. No? Katrina says there's a lot. So,
Well, the 13th then? Is there open chambers before that?
as far as I know. Well, congratulations, Lee. You're going to be chairing a meeting.
So I guess my question is, I mean, what would the purpose of that be? If it's just going to be the 5 people that are involved in public safety, I'm just not sure many minds are going to be changed either way.
Okay, let me make an alternative suggestion, kind of like a compromise. Why don't we set this one aside and try to get through some of the other simpler ones and return to this at a later time, maybe at our next meeting. That would give all of us time to think of questions that perhaps we could send to Derek and Jen, and they could spend more time being prepared to answer. Does that make sense, Derek, Jen?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I think what would also, and I would ask the legislators to take a look at, there was a series of questions that Derek and Jen sent to their staff. I think whenever we're considering whether to add more staffing, it would also be important for us to consider what the morale is at the sheriff's department, as well as some of the concerns of being overworked and not having enough staff are. So I would ask my colleagues to please look at that email that was previously sent.
Okay, Shauna, could we ask you please to withdraw your OTR motion for the moment?
Yeah, I would like to withdraw the OTR for the 2 additional deputies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I assume that's all right with, who seconded? I've forgotten. Travis. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So moving on to something much less complicated. Mr. Sigler has renewed his annual Parks Fund motion.
Annual, but it could have been annual, except the whole world blew up and then it.
Well, yes, but before that it was annual. So Mike, why don't you discuss this and move it?
I'm going to take you to okay. Well, let me move it first. So I want to move this Preserving Parks Fund Parks Grant Program, $50,000 one time.
Okay, Dan seconds?
Yes.
All right. Okay, do you want to explain this for the benefit of those of us who weren't here the first couple times this went around?
I do. Well, it passed. So that's why it's coming back. Plus, Dan mentioned it to me and I said, this is a good time to bring this back, Dan, because frankly, this was a popular program, I thought. I moved this. It was only $50,000, one-time money. We were going to try it out, see how it fit. It's basically $50,000 where if you have a park in your town, you apply for this money. The grant was up to $5,000. Once the money was gone, it was gone. It wasn't like, it's an endless thing of money. It was for things like, Lansing wanted to do a study on its park. This kind of gave us a shove forward, and now we have kind of a big study on Myers Park. And I don't know what we're going to do with it, but that's what it was for. I know Annie's, one of her parks up in Enfield or Trumansburg, they got some money, and it was more of like a beautification kind of thing as well. It's just a lot of our little parks locally don't get any attention. We always focus on things like Stewart Park, but Stewart Park could certainly apply for this money too. But there's some things they want to do that just don't fit in any box. And this was a good way just to kind of get $50,000 out there. And it kind of got the town and the county working together, and it was run just through the planning department. And like I said, it was a very simple thing to kind of apply for money. Very similar to kind of how we do STB, just on a much smaller scale. And people liked it. So I don't know, when I move things and people like it, I tend to move them again. So, and that's where we are today.
Okay, well, I contacted our planning department who hadn't heard about this, but they have done it before, so there would not be a lot of setup costs. Katie did want to mention that this was not directly related to any of the plans or strategies in DPS's work plan for 2023. Nevertheless, she's not saying they wouldn't be willing to do it. One thing that she did say is that there were only 5 municipalities who had not received these grants in the 2 previous years where we've had the program. And that if the ceiling on each individual grant was $5,000, then we would only need $25,000 for this program in order to assure that every municipality in the county actually got a grant. I see that Katie's on if she wants to participate in this at all.
Yeah, I'm just here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. So I see Annie's hand and Mike's hand. Anybody else? Dan, Randy? Okay. Go ahead, folks.
Thank you. Katie, I'm going to give you a question. So when you had this program before, when we gave you this program before, because this was before from an OTR, I believe that the legislature did a few years back. And could you refresh us to the approximate amount of time and effort that it took for your department to administer this?
Yeah, sure. So this was actually only run for 1 year, 2019. It was funded at $50,000 again for 2020, but due to the pandemic, we wound up returning those funds to the general funds. We did do a program evaluation kind of mid-year through 2019 to see whether it was something at the time, the peak committee wanted us to move forward in our budget again. And at the time they decided, yes, it was something to propose to the legislature. The legislature did decide to fund it for 2020. But at the time we did an evaluation like mid-year, I think June of 2019, and we estimated that a staff member had spent about 80 hours on setting up the program, doing the online application, figuring out the guidelines. So we expect it would be significantly less than that to administer, since we already have all of those materials ready to go. And we have made some tweaks to the program just in terms of contracting to make it hopefully run a little smoother and fit better with the county timelines for contracting, et cetera.
So would you estimate 40 to 60 hours, or just ballpark?
Yeah, I think that seems like a reasonable amount. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, got Mike Lane.
Mike, thanks for proposing this again. This was very popular. A lot of municipalities took part in it. It was competitive. Basically, if you put your grant in and there was money, or put your grant application in and there was money, it got funded. I wouldn't be in favor of saying, well, these particular municipalities didn't receive any, and therefore we're allocate just for them. Certainly, I would encourage them to put in their application. If they've got something, they might have an extra point or two because they haven't been funded before. But this has added a little bit of money to a lot of projects. Certainly in my district, if anybody hasn't been over to see the pocket park created by Freeville, the railroad with the railroad theme, please go over there and see it. It's wonderful. Money for Montgomery Park and Dryden, and money for the town. These are good things, and it's not a lot of money. It's one time. And as Katie just told us, when we had planned it before, the pandemic got in the way, so we didn't have to spend that money then.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it was competitive. I think it was first come, first served, wasn't it, Katie?
I guess that's what I mean by competitive.
Oh, yeah,
I guess I'm wrong in using that term, but it was first come, first serve.
yeah, until the money ran out. Okay, Dan?
Yeah, I just wanted to state, and also Katie, please correct me if this is not correct, is that it's not just parks, it's trails and other potential natural areas. I'm not sure, exactly what wording was used, but just to be clear, it's not just parks. Does that sound about right, Katie?
Yeah, it's park or trail infrastructure, park or trail improvements, recreational equipment for parks or trails. Yeah, we made it very clear it's both.
Thank you.
Okay, Randy?
Yes, thank you. I remember when this came out and Newfield didn't apply in time, so I don't like the first come, first serve. And I imagine Enfield probably didn't receive anything either on this because they just don't know what's going on. Didn't happen for them. So I like this, but I would suggest that you allocate funds to every town equally. And if they don't apply by a certain date, it would go back in a pool. So that was my thought.
Okay, Greg?
Yeah, I can get behind this with a couple of things. I think things should be competitive. I think you should put a proposal together and the best proposal should win. I don't think you should just earmark, because we might as well just write checks for, however many $1,000s and pass them out. So I do think that this should be competitive. I think we should take the $5,000 cap off. And I think we should, have people bring interesting proposals and have a review date and look at them all. And if people don't know what's going on out there, that's, not necessarily no fault of the program. It may be fault of the, municipality that's not watching what's going on. So I would be fully in support of this if they're, I don't like the language in here with preference being given to municipalities that did not receive funding. They may not have had a worthy project to receive funding. So I would like to see that go away, and I'd like to see the cap come off. And then I really hesitate to bring this up because I know there's some sensitivity around STPB, but this does seem like there's some overlap with the outdoor parks and recreation grants.
Yes, there is.
A little bit. So it seems like this may be an opportunity to have an already in place grant panel that's reviewing grants, have a separate sort of grant to review with in the same period. I don't know, Katie, tell me if that's a crazy idea.
Yeah, well, right now, the way the tourism or the outdoor recreation grant is written is, I've had clarification, actually, Deborah, I spoke to you incorrectly earlier. Municipalities are not eligible for that grant program. They are, however, eligible for the capital grant program. So that could be another venue for them to apply for more funding, because those grants range anywhere from $5,000 to $100,000. So they could be bigger awards. But Nick also joined in case we have more tourism grant specific questions to dive into.
Well, unless you're offering an amendment, Greg, are you offering an amendment?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Amanda?
Well, yeah, I would just respond, Greg, that I think the idea of this was that it was very simple. It did take a lot of time to set up at the beginning, but to set up a whole nother grant panel and all of that would be, I think, asking a lot of our department.
The grant panel already is, what I was suggesting was not a new grant panel. It would be utilizing an existing grant panel.
Yeah, I think the idea of this is that it was a somewhat simple way that we could support our municipalities in parks. And if I remember correctly, the idea that municipalities that had not gotten money the first year, we wanted them to have the option to, try again. And I'm not sure it would be like at the expense of other municipalities, but if some who didn't get any would come back and, they would be given priority. I think it was sort of a feel-good thing all around, and trying to put too many other restrictions on it would maybe take that away. So that's certainly the prerogative of folks if that's the way they want to go. But I would support this as is, and it sounds like from what Katie said, they put in a lot of the infrastructure work. It wouldn't take that much more to go through it again. So, thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. Are we ready to vote on this as Mr. Sigler has proposed it? Looks like we are.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grannison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
14 ayes, 0 noes. That passes.
Thank you. Okay, next.
President muck it all up. Nice.
Always next year, Mike.
Making it better.
Okay, next we have two OTRs that are basically proposing the same thing. One is just a bit more detailed than the other. So Shauna, I will let you explain your OTR for the airport.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. I would like to move the OTR to have a strategic plan done for our airport. I met with Roxanne and Josh and discussed what they would need in order to not only figure out the future for the airport, but also to conduct a study to see who's using our airport, as I think it would be important in order for us to market to some of our partners. And so in meeting with Roxanne and Josh, they come up with the amount of $200,000 to hire a consulting firm to do the study and provide a strategic plan. I know the Air Services Board had been working on what they called a strategic plan, but it was pretty basic and really
largely aspirational.
Yeah. And so I think, we're at this point, we're kind of surrendering and showing the white flag. And we're going to be investing a lot of money into our airport in the next few years. We understand it's going to take some regrowth, and we want to make sure we're going down the right path. So consider this an investment.
Okay, so you're moving that. Can I get a second? Mike Lane?
Yeah, can I speak, please? I wanted to say that my OTR, the next one, I put that in after we had a meeting of our F&I committee, and they were supportive of this, so I put it in as a placeholder, didn't have a figure. So I will be withdrawing mine in favor of Shauna's.
Okay, and seconding Shauna's?
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. That simplifies things greatly. Okay, discussion. Hands? Annie?
I just want to make sure somebody says something in addition to what Shauna said, that I think this is really needed. As was said, the airport's been hit hard with the pandemic, and we have a change in leadership. So I think it's a good time to, for several reasons, to look at a strategic plan. And so I'm very happy to support this.
Thank you. Anyone else? Amanda?
I just want to clarify the 200,000, it says anywhere up to, how will we get you'll go through the process, get an RFP, find somebody, blah, blah, blah. Could it really be that up to that much? Is that a reasonable number?
I think that Shauna said that she discussed it with Roxanne and Josh. Apparently this stuff's really
Roxanne is here.
expensive. Oh, well, if Roxanne is here, that makes life even easier. Hi, Roxanne. You want to weigh in here?
Hello there. Yep, I can jump in on that. So what I did is I kind of reached out to other airports that have done these. Crazy enough, we haven't seen many done after the pandemic. People are starting to do that though, looking to see, what opportunities are out there. But it could be anywhere up to, between 150,000 and 200,000. But you can look at it. So I suggest that we put in there things separated out. and then prioritize. So you can do, say one of the sections, could be 20,000 that they put in for the RFP. We can say, maybe that doesn't need to happen right now. Maybe we prioritize some of the other items, look at it as a group and say, this is critical. We need to do this first. So it could be much less. It just really depends on what the RFPs come in at.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Oh, let's see. Who's got their hand raised? Oh, Henry and then Mike Sigler.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question Amanda asked. So I
Okay.
withdraw.
So we all have sticker shock. That's clear. Mike Sigler.
My question is about the cost. It's just, maybe things have changed. I mean, obviously things have changed in the airline industry enough, whereas a new study is warranted. It just seems like we just did like a ton of studies on this. That's why, I mean, what's the focus of the study kind of going to be? Is it going to be, I guess, is it more than a study? Are we hiring a consultant to, I mean, it seems like we need better routes. It seems like we need,
I think that to say it's a study kind of sells it short. We need to have a concrete plan for how to get the airport back up and running at full capacity. And that's going to be more complicated because of the larger mess that affects the entire industry.
I mean, I'd like to know, are we even going to study maybe making this an authority as opposed to keeping this under the purview of the legislature? I mean, I'd like to just kind of know the scope maybe of.
Well, I can't answer that,
I know
but
you can't.
perhaps Shauna and or Roxanne can address your concerns. Hello, Shauna, Roxanne?
Yeah, why don't I let Roxanne hop in on that one?
Sure. So as far as the scope, I was looking at what I've been doing is going through information on, airport strategic plans and, what has been done in the past. I've been talking to our two current consultants. We wanted to do an RFP to make sure, we're getting everything we need to happen on, strategic plan, a recovery plan, a business plan, kind of all, encompassing, but have it separated out so we could, determine what sections are needed. As far as a authority, now, I don't believe, me personally, is the time to look at that. The airport is, in financial trouble. We need to, get back so that we're self-sufficient again. That's, one of the goals over the next 3 to 5 years is making sure that we're increasing our air service so that we can have air service and competitive air service, making sure that our rates and charges are competitive. A lot of that's part of the plan. I've reached out and I'm waiting to get some plans from other airports to see RFPs, what they've put in, what they've got out of it, how they've made out from it. But it's more of a business and a recovery plan, step by step of how do we get from A to Z and be financially self-sufficient.
Does that answer your question, Mike?
I guess, I just kind of have a general feeling that we kind of know what we need to do already. I don't know how much more a study's going to tell us. It would almost seem more wise to kind of put that money into hiring somebody to actually kind of go out into the field and start doing as opposed to studying. I don't mean to sound like that, but I mean, if you were to hire someone to go and talk to American Airlines and stay on all the airline, I don't know. It just seems like you kind of know what we need to do. I don't know.
That has been part of the conversation, Mike. And that will probably be one of the recommendations is for us to hire, dare I say, like a lobbyist or a marketing person to actually approach all the airports in recruiting new flights. That will probably, my guess is that will probably be one of their top recommendations.
Okay.
And can I just jump in there real quick? We do have people that are currently working on that as well. consultant wise that we've used. We have somebody helping us with that. We have, we're going to a conference in October and meeting with multiple airlines there. So, we're working, just trying to increase the flights, increase the service. But I think we need to look at, how do we do it and do it best to make sure that we're successful.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got Greg, Mike Lane, Rich, and Henry.
Yeah, I fully support this. I think this is definitely one area of our county that's been dramatically hit by the pandemic, right? If the pandemic didn't happen, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation likely about the airport. So this is truly a need. And I think of this as an opportunity while Roxanne and Josh and the rest of the team at the airport have other things like running an airport, even though employments are down and there's some other challenges facing the airport. This is a good opportunity to create a business plan, a roadmap. A study will be part of that likely, but that's just one piece. So I look at this as sort of bringing everybody into the huddle and really getting a good roadmap, and that would be my expectation. I also trust the F&I committee and the airport folks to be able to put together a scope and go through those motions and approve that. But I definitely think that this is wise funding. I think we have an incredible airport. We have dedicated staff that are struggling because of the current conditions. And they want to struggle out of this position, right? They want to be successful. They don't want to just throw in the towel. They want to keep fighting for the airport because they believe in the work that they do. So I think that this is a great way to support them. I think this is a great way to support our community and our economy. And I think we should all consider this, and I look forward to the results if this passes.
Thank you. Mike Lane.
Thanks. To Mike Sigler's point, I think that one thing this can do for us is to hone in on the business plan. Because we've talked over the last years through the grant processes about how we can increase revenue for the airport besides airplanes. And lots of airports get rental income from facilities that are sited on them, for facilities that are used, for other transportation alternatives. I, for example, have always thought it should be a transportation hub, and maybe our inner city buses should come there with a shuttle into the city instead of dumping everybody on Green Street. So I think these kinds of things will help us understand better where we should head to try to make some of these things we've talked about over the years actually happen.
Thanks, Mike. Rich?
Yeah, I support this this OTR. It does seem like the ground has shifted below us here and in the air. But I'm wondering, the number, somebody mentioned sticker shock, $200,000. If there would be some process that, as it's segmented out, it would be the different proposals for study or planning would go before F&I. I'd feel more comfortable with it. I mean, I think I'm going to vote for it either way, but
I should think that even if we put the money in the budget, they're still going to have to come through F&I to approve the final contract. So I don't think that's going to be, yeah, right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I've got Henry and then Lee.
Yes, Roxanne, you mentioned that you're waiting for other reports. Has anybody done any similar reports during the pandemic that they've produced?
I haven't heard back from anybody that's done any since the pandemic, just people that have done them prior to. So I'm still waiting to hear if there's any that were completed during the pandemic. I still have some calls out to other airport directors. Some are kind of currently hopefully working on them now. So I think it'll be maybe something that we can share information on what they're looking for. But to kind of touch on the other point, I think it's critical too. We're going to have other people review the strategic plans and make the approval there. So I think that's an important part as well. is to have somebody else look at, what we get submitted and make the determination to, have people review like we've done in the past, other RFPs. It's reviewed by a group.
Also, did we do any such reports in the last 4 years for the airport?
We did a strategic plan prior. It was more of a business plan. And a lot of that, we did that back in 2019. And it was reviewing a lot of our current contracts. So that was stuff we did, where we stood contractually, looking over the rental car companies because we had to go out for RFPs. We had began working on airline contracts, and then the pandemic hit. So that hasn't been finalized, but that's part of something that we've already completed process that we're working through. So it was more of looking over contracts and what we had moving forward on how to making sure that we were in line with other airports our size.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Lee and Randy.
I think Rich hit it. The ground has shifted. Just a quick reminder for those that may be wondering why we're looking at a $200,000 expense in the context of it, and then maybe Lisa or Norma or Roxanne, remind me, the total capital investment in the airport in the last 7 or 8 years has been in the range of $20 million.
Oh.
Plus, okay. And we're on the hook for about $14 million in bonds.
13, yeah.
13, okay. So even using that $20 million figure, we're looking at 1% to try to sustain that multi-million-dollar investment, given the changing circumstances we've had in the last 3 years. So I'm
It's a no-brainer.
very much in support of this.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Randy?
Yes, I'm going to support this. I think it's a smart thing to do. If memory serves, I think we're going to be funding about $1.3 million in
1,600,000.
$1.6 million, I'm sorry. So this is money. If we don't do something, then that funding is going to have to continue if we don't have a good plan. So that's why I support it.
Okay, we ready to vote? Take it away, Britt.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
No.
Henry Grannison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
13 ayes, 1 no, that passes.
Okay, next up is Shauna's OTR, a 2-year, multi-year commitment of $86,000 a year to the 2-year peer outreach center. Shauna, you're up.
Thank you. This is for the Mental Health Association and their peer drop-in center that's going to be located on the Commons. I know that legislators have had many emails from people that have participated, as well as peers that would actively be employed with the center. We also heard a group that came and spoke with us about the impact that Mental Health Association has had on their well-being and their own mental health. And so I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if Josephina's here this evening. I don't see her, but I am happy to answer any questions if there are any, if I can.
Do you want to make the motion, Shauna?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
And
Okay.
Annie seconds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions and comments? Mike Sigler.
Just wondering what department has oversight over this?
Mental health.
Mental health.
Anybody else? Well, I'll weigh in. While I'm quite sympathetic to the need for mental health services, I will not be voting for this. As far as I can see, they have half of their funding so far committed from a New York State program for 1 year. And my feeling is simply that if we support this, commit to supporting it for 2 years, despite their optimism about pursuing funding from other sources, we are likely to be on the hook for this forever. And I don't see metrics of any kind. We have plenty of anecdotal evidence about what a difference this has made in individual people's lives, but there's no way to measure its effectiveness, its success, or its failure. And I am unwilling to commit to an open-ended obligation to fund this at this level for a long period of time. So that's just me. Greg.
Yeah, Deb, I appreciate your concerns and sharing those with us. And I do think opportunity for real metric. I guess for me, when I heard folks speak on this during our open forum or feedback session on the budget, for me, the fact that, you know, some people were saying because of programs like this or this type of program, I'm here today, I'm alive. Like that was a metric enough for me. I hope that they're wildly successful. I think if we can ensure that our mental health department, you know, supports them in any way possible. And if there is wild success, if this does become a long-term investment in our community, I think it's the right one, because if we can do something where people are willing to come and say, this program changed my life, this program made me better, this program created something in me that I didn't know was there or showed me what was inside me, and then is encouraging them to give back in a way to help others. I think that this is a great example of a pay it forward type of program. So for me, that's why I do want to support this, but I also want to cautiously support this and make sure that we can get some really good data around usage. And again, I'm not an expert in that area, so I would ask the experts to provide what the best metrics might be. But I do think that this is right now, especially with everything going on in the world, this is the right type of thing for us to be funding.
Veronica.
Thank you. Basically agree with all what Greg said. I think we all heard, it was like almost the entire public forum, but kind of a lot of people. Okay, 5 out of whatever. It sounded more impressive my way, but
Yes.
okay, but even outside of this, I think that there's been pretty strong collective acknowledgement that mental health struggles are just a overwhelmingly huge problem in our community, like throughout the county. And hearing these powerful stories of what the Mental Health Association has done for people, and you know, this is also just anecdotally, but I hear a lot from people who really value spaces, like physical spaces to be, that are like supportive and safe, and where they can come to be with people who struggle with the same things they struggle with, as well as peer support generally. That's, I often hear people speak about those two things, and this has both, as being really powerful in like support through, you know, some kind of struggle. In this case, it's mental health, but it could be whatever. So I think I'm really optimistic about this, and I hope they find all the funding from other places that they're looking for, but I actually think it would likely be valuable to, you know, even if we are on the hook for the whole cost next year, or, I mean, I guess we'll see, but you know, we should see how it goes. But I really, really think this would be a very valuable thing, and it would be a shame if it couldn't start up when it's ready to, because we don't fund it.
Okay, I've got Annie and then Amanda.
So I don't know if it was anybody else besides Shauna and I, but we talked to Josephine, I believe was her name, right? The director, and they already started the program. And not knowing where the funding was going to be, and there's part of me from like a county financial point of view, like, oh no, you gotta get all your ducks in a row. But I don't remember the exact terms, but they said there was a need, and they didn't want to wait, you know, till everything was 100% funded or 100% figuring out where everything was going to be. There was just an overwhelming need. So they have they're going to be flexible and provide for the needs of people coming off the street. There's a lot of people with mental health issues where you can't just, even if you knew the number or, jump through those hoops to get an appointment, that's not going to be today. And then what do you do in between your appointments? There's some groups and some programs they can go to. This is to help fill in those gaps for those people that don't, fit in between all these things. And as was said, I hear very frequently that we don't have enough mental health services, and we have a lot of people that are struggling in the community. So if this is one thing that we can do, and it's unique, we don't have a drop-in center like this. So I am happy to support this if we want to, help them or urge them to figure out how to, fund this outside of the county or with minimal county, funding. But let's at least, go for a couple of years and help get this off the ground. Thank you.
Amanda, and then Mike Lane.
Thanks. I agree with everything folks have said, and I've had my own mental health struggles, and I support this in generally. But I still have questions. So this is like an independent organization. And somebody said what department, and you said mental health. What does that mean? What will mental health be doing to oversee this?
The contract would be between the mental health and the Mental Health Association. And the contract would be monitored and overseen by the Mental Health Department.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess my other question is why a 2-year, multi-year? Was there reasoning behind 2 versus 1 or 3?
They initially asked for 1, I thought.
Does anyone know?
I'm happy to answer. They want to go year by year. However, if it's successful, they would like to keep going.
Okay, I'd like to make an amendment to move this to 1 year.
Mike, is that a second? Okay, is that friendly?
I don't know who moved it.
I'm sorry?
It's not friendly to me.
Okay, so we need to have a vote on that. Does anybody want to address that before we vote? Annie?
Just getting back to mental health issues and helping people be more stable in the community. I think 2 years is going to give them a little bit more stability. And if they can't function, if they can't make it, then they won't be coming back. If they're not in existence, they won't be coming back in next year. So I think I'd also like to take a leap of faith with them. And I feel like this is really the right thing to do. So I would like to stick with 2 years.
Okay, anybody else? Rich?
Just seconding what people have said, the stories that were shared with us were really moving, and they lead me to want to support this, but I'm perfectly happy with 1 time because I think they'll be able to come back next year and really tell us, that it worked. So.
Hey, anybody else before we vote? Travis?
I think 2 years is appropriate. I think when you're trying to attract talent, when you're trying to bring people in, you have to be able to give them some sort of security. It's a new program, right? So people need to know if they're coming to work there, if they're going to be involved, that they're at least coming for more than a year, so you can attract people. Folks that use the services as well, they need to know that this isn't a fly-by-night, that this is going to be there, that they can build these relationships with folks, that they can count on this place to exist further down the road. So I think 2 years is appropriate.
I'm confused. I didn't realize it was a new program. All those people that came and spoke with us the other night suggested that it was a program they had already participated in and were now volunteering in. Dan?
Mental Health Association has existed for like 50 years. They just rented this space.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got Mike Lane and then Shauna.
I'm just questioning, does the mental health department still sponsor the Starlight Club? I think that's what it was called at Henry St. John's. We used to get funding for that. We used to have that come to us. And that was sort of a drop-in center, as I recall. And maybe it's not there anymore, but
I think that's gone, Mike.
I believe that that's evolved into the PROS program that is in-house in mental health, I believe. I mean, there are still, the mental health department still contracts with Mental Health Association for other services, but I believe the Starlight Club is not.
Yeah, I don't think that wouldn't surprise me if it's not there anymore, but I do remember visiting it, for example, and it made me think of what's being asked for here a lot. And it was very popular among folks that were in need of those services.
Shauna?
Yeah, I mean, I continue to think that one of the biggest issues in our county is mental health. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that some mental health providers are working for some people and some are working for others. Some people don't feel comfortable going to our mental health provider. Some of them feel comfortable going to the peer services. I mean, each person has their own preference. And so for us to be able to support a program under $100,000 that's helping people, I consider it really an investment in our community right now. So this by far is the single topic that I think we've all heard the most about is mental health, and there being a lack of services in our community. So $86,000 is really not much to spend in providing services for our constituents.
I just can't help wondering if there might not be a better use for that money to provide services. But anyway, we have an amendment to vote on. Britt?
Shauna Black.
Can you state again the amendment? Because sometimes people have been
Yep.
unclear.
The amendment is to change this from a 2-year peer outreach center to a 1-year peer outreach center funding.
No.
Okay. Travis Brooks,
No.
Randy Brown,
No.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
No.
Ann Corman,
No.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
No.
Veronica Pillar,
No.
Lee Shirtliff,
No.
Mike Sigler,
No.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
5 ayes, 9 noes, motion fails.
Okay, so now we're going to vote on the main motion. Lee?
Just to clarify for you, where is this, are the services provided specifically? Is there multiple clubhouses?
Center Ithaca.
All Center Ithaca. And for anyone that's advocating this, is there any chance that the outreach will end up outside of Center Ithaca, satellite to other communities potentially?
Probably not.
Okay.
That's what I said.
Okay, let's vote on the OTR.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Amanda Champion,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson.
No.
13 ayes, 1 no. Motion passes.
Okay, the next OTR up is Mike Lane's proposal to reduce the $5 solid waste management fee to $4. Mike, I'll let you.
Yes, I'd like to move that. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Greg seconds.
Thank you, Greg. I have an awful lot of support and respect for our solid recycling and materials management I still have trouble with the new name. Have been very interested in it ever since it got started and before. And we've had a wonderful manager, and we still have a wonderful manager in Barbara Ekstrom, and a good financial manager, I put it that way. I've always been someone who has questioned the solid waste fee and, what the proposals are and how we can keep that down, because it's added to the tax bill. It is a fee, of course. But just like the homeowner's cost for their real property taxes, we need to examine that with a close glass as well. Last year, I fully supported raising it $5 on top of the year before, which I think it went up 3 or 4. And the reason was, and I think this full legislature cared enough to keep the recycling program going. And that was pretty important that we did that. We had many counties, and Barbara told us, and it was true, many counties were abandoning recycling, just trucking it off to the landfills again, like they did 30 years ago. I don't want to ever see us go back to that. But on the other hand, I always remember Tom Todd, who was a legislator on the Board of Reps, who was I believe the chair of Public Works at that time. And when they established the recycling program, he always said commodities are commodities, and that's what recycling items are. And the prices go up and the prices go down. And last year they were in the pits, no question about it. This year, Barbara told us they've started to improve some. And she also told us that in spite of some increases in our costs, she now has a reserve, a fund balance of about 2.5 million. She's going to use 400,000 and some money of that, she told us. She also told us that the solid waste fee is $1 was about $50,000. And so I thought, let's help our ratepayers, our taxpayers, a little bit this year. Let's not just add on another $5. Maybe we only add 4. And so, Barbara, if I've misstated anything that you told us, please correct me. But that's why I think we should at least shave $1 off.
Okay, can I get a second on Mike's motion? Greg, okay, thank you. Barb, I think you're in the best position to address. Not at all.
I have more clarification.
Speak in your microphone, please.
So I've met almost all of you, Trevor. It's nice to meet you in person. Travis, I'm so sorry. Oh, well, so I've been here 37 years and kind of crazy, but I've seen ups and downs, inside out and all around. And I've seen a trend over and over. What comes up must go down. And because we don't have any reliance on property taxes, and we're an enterprise fund, and we're trying to grow diversion, as I mentioned in my presentation, next year, we're reaching out to the underserved communities who could really use our help in reducing food scraps and in taking advantage of our waste reduction programs to save money. That's one new development. I am putting forth an agenda in my budget to provide those kinds of things. And we're not just about disposal and recycling. So the big picture, and I did some homework. I knew that when we put the budget together, we had what's called a commodity revenue for the whole mix of about $116 a ton. That was, until August. We got the bill the middle end of September, and it went down from 116 to 80. And then I didn't have the information for September. I begged for it for today because we usually get our bill the third week of the following month. It's going to be 46. And I'm not making this up at all. I just inquired heavily because I wanted to be sure. And, you know, whatever you decide to do about fees is a policy decision. Okay, I come up with the best solutions for the program and the finances, and Mike's right. I do a lot of thinking about the finances because they're very complex. So as it is, what Jason and I came to you with 2 years ago when we awarded the new contract for the center, it was 3 times more, and it was about $1 million more. Then a few years before that, I came to you with the recycling collection bid. That was $500,000 more. And as time goes by, things are going to be up again. And so when I'm recommending $5, that's just $250,000 of expense. It would have been about $30 on the annual fee if we hadn't reduced our budget, if we hadn't taken a lot of steps. I really think that $1 on the annual fee, when we're already going to take out $400,000 from the fund balance, knowing that what we're hearing, and I know why this is actually happening. It hasn't quite. It's going to hit the streets in terms of knowledge, but what's happening is that China is going through a terrible situation in terms of their, inflation, recession. They have shut down permanently some mills. So the mills that are now domestic, which we've increased in this country, don't really need more material. So it's a supply demand thing this time around. And I can't tell you what it's going to be next year, but what I can tell you is that we're going to fall short about 60 to 80,000 this year. And next year, I hate to tell you, it could be $500,000 if it really stays at 46. We budgeted $105 a ton for that ACR when it had been 127 at its highest. So the one caution I'm going to make, originally when the markets were really good, I thought, okay, maybe we won't have to borrow so much for capital investments from the from our fund. And, it comes out as fund balance, so we could use some of that. And then now I'm thinking that with everything going on, plus the CPI, we anticipated 3% this year. I think it's over 9% right now. And we budgeted next year for 5%. It doesn't all look very pretty to me. And, we do a 5-year budget. And when you look at the 5-year budget, and I'll remind you what Jason asked this legislature, and I was right with him, we need to hold the annual fee to a $5 increase for 5 years because of the volatility of the recycling markets. We don't want to be in a situation where the Department of Recycling and Materials Management has to borrow from the property taxes for any reason. So, I think that it's one of these, what comes up goes down, and you never know what will happen. And I think it's financially prudent to keep things where they are. And we're very fortunate that we are as stable, because if we do wind up with a dire situation next year, at least we have a fund balance to rely upon. So that's my little to-do.
Thanks, Barb. I see Greg has his hand up, and then Lee, and then Annie.
I would love questions.
There seems to be so many.
Yes, there are so many.
So I just want to, I've got a couple of little questions that all fit into a larger question.
Yeah.
Your fund balance policy, it's that if you have surplus revenues at the end of the year, that gets put into fund balance. Is that how you fund your fund balance, or do you budget funding your fund balance?
No, we put it in there. if there's surplus.
If there's surplus.
And if it's negative, of course, we have to take it out. We are anticipating that we're going to be in the hole at
So-
the end of the year.
So, okay, so this is good because essentially with a higher fee, as we've increased the fee over time, and we've seen maybe some success from the commodities market for recycling materials at a high in some years. Now we're seeing it at a low.
It might be a low. Let's just say
It
it
might
could be.
yeah, maybe a low.
Yeah.
So we've essentially, the payer, right, the properties who've paid into this, fee over time have built up that fund balance. Or we've built that up
Right.
because we've seen higher than expected revenues.
Yeah.
So this is, again.
And we've cut costs too,
Yeah.
quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think this is an opportunity to give back when there is unless there's a clearly stated fund balance policy or best practice, that we should keep 2 million or $1.5 million.
We do have one, just so you know.
And what does that
And
state?
that is a minimum of 16%. We fell below that. We almost fell below 10% when Jason and I came forward. I know what is in store for us as we continue. If the CPI doesn't go down and we see transportation continuing to be more expensive, which it is, and we have transportation in almost all of our contracts, I fear, looking at that picture, and we'll be sharing it with the PDQ committee and then, couldn't go to the full legislature, that we should be safer rather than gambling, and $1 on the fee is 50,000 in expenses when we could be dealing with bigger problems. That's all. And it is your choice. I mean, if you want to take more out of the fund balance, hope for the best, it isn't bad policy. It's just, I just have to recommend something that's much more conservative.
Yeah, no, and again, I
Yeah.
appreciate and respect the approach.
And I respect how you're asking the question because it's a very good point.
I would just like to know what 16% is.
Well.
What that amount
so,
should be.
It is on our budget of $9 million. 10% is 900, 5% is another 400,000. It's roughly $1.5 million. I don't have, I'm not jumping from my calculator here, but it's roughly $1.5 million.
So I hear you, and I know that we're well above that. I would have liked Mike to maybe propose a little bit more than $1. But that's just my opinion. So I'll stop there. I've shared enough of my
The one
thoughts.
other thing to consider is it used to be completely unacceptable for us to borrow from our fund balance to pay for our operating budget. And Rick had a different approach, but I still think it's uncomfortable. If we're taking $400,000 out, which would leave, 2.2 million. There's some costs in my budget, like the CCE contract and some things that we didn't budget. And we could be facing, I don't see how now $105 a ton for 11,000 tons of residential single stream material. That's going to be a lot of money. I just worry, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would point out if you take that 400 to 500,000 out this year and another 500,000 next year, she's going to be right down to her 16%.
Well, I think it could be a slight bit lower, but why get in that position to worry? And then it's like a bouncing ball. You continue to follow that ball. And, 1 year is good, another year is bad. That's different than county budget management. This is an enterprise fund, and it's not legal for us to be taking money from the county budget.
Okay, I've got Lee, Annie, and Amanda.
Barb, there was something I didn't understand in what you were talking about with the projections with Jason and holding.
Oh, yeah, because you were just starting this year, sure.
Holding the $5. Has it been projected out over a period of time that we
5
should be
years.
raising $5
Yeah,
each year?
It was projected based on a 5-year budget. at the time. And I don't remember what that commodity revenue was, but it was, Jason grilled me and I had to march to the beat of the drummer to do an awful lot of work to show where we stood. And if the others here remember, we presented you with 6 options and this legislature approved the option to go to $5 a year for 5 years. Now, we could have said, oh, well, things are so marvelously good for a year, but then, it's never clear with recycling what could happen. And I think honestly, the current state of economic affairs in this world has been a driving force for many things. And that's why we have the uncertainty in China. Does that help you?
It does. What year are we in as far as the 5
Oh,
years?
well, we're in 3. We're in 3.
Okay, so it's gone up 5, and now we're proposing another 5 out of 25.
No, this is our 3rd.
Yeah, it's gone up 5 and then 5 and then
Now this is our 3rd.
yeah, that's,
This meaning the 23 budget.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot more to say, but I will say this much. I'll be retiring next year and I will be giving you a full analysis and recommendations for what we should be doing with our next procurement, because the time has come to put in a county proposal for the parts of this that we could do. Because when you increase a contract by $1 million.
you're talking now about the pickup, the collection
No,
contract.
I'm talking right now about the recycling center.
Oh,
We
okay.
can't do the pickup. That would be impossible.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We can't market materials. We can't drive a truck to transfer the materials. But when it comes to looking at and putting in a proposal to go against the one company that will propose by looking at the operation of the recycling center and costing that out, I think we will be pleasantly surprised. I really do. So keep that in mind. That has nothing to do with the $1 on the annual fee, other than we could see a drop in the annual fee if we were to think smarter. They killed us. It ruined us. I mean, to be honest with you, it deflated so many of us in terms of our spirit, in terms of how much more we were charged. And that's why Mike and I really do communicate well. And you're right, Mike, that was the decision as to whether we recycle. When you get $1.3 million, $1 million plus the 500,000 and your budget is over 9 million, when 81% of it is contracted services, 15% is staff, and the rest is equipment, et cetera. I mean, gotta look at it. All right, I've said it.
Okay, I've got Annie and Amanda.
Thank you. So just looking at the volatility of the recyclables, the commodity prices that you're getting for that. And, over the past few years that I've been on the legislature, and I know you are very conservative in your approach to, to your budget and to your departments, but still, what was it 3 so years ago, we saw just such a decrease in the commodity reimbursement for recyclables that you had to reduce staff, your fund balance fell precipitously, and you've just finally gotten it back up. I don't have a question. What I want to say is I don't support trying to take $1 or $50,000 out of that. I think I do hear what people are saying, my fellow legislators, but let's look at that next year and see, and we have some other things that might be changing next year. So you've kept us on the right path.
We have to
So
look at it all the time.
I'd rather
I'm
wait.
following this daily, weekly, monthly. I get reports that often from downtown. And if there's good news, we've already done some thinking about what's going to happen at the end of the year, but it's a moving moving process all the time. And this is the first year where I really want to do more. And I have the staff fully now to do more with our community that hasn't been well served, and to bring these programs to environmental justice areas and to really reach out and provide opportunity that we haven't before.
Right, and I'll just add, so thank you for mentioning that again, because that's something I wanted to say. If we kind of, got the low hanging fruit and getting out there with waste reduction, composting, getting out there, but to be able to really get out to those underserved populations, to ratchet back now doesn't feel just. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you, Annie. Amanda?
Thank you for this conversation. It's interesting to hear everyone's thoughts. I personally look at it very differently. I think we should be paying for our waste. I think humans produce a ton of waste and we should pay for it. I don't think that any homeowner or any resident should get away with not paying. And every year we make more waste and that costs more money. So I will not be in favor of this amendment.
Okay, anyone else? Are we ready to vote? Okay.
Shauna Black,
No.
Travis Brooks,
No.
Randy Brown,
No.
Amanda Champion,
No.
Henry Grannison,
No.
Rich John,
No.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
No.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
No.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
No.
Deborah Dawson,
No.
4 ayes, 10 noes, motion fails.
Okay, we've got.
Thank you, Barb.
15 more minutes. Yes, thank you, Barb. And since we tabled one of our OTRs from tonight's schedule, let's please move on to Rich John's OTR for a grant writer. Rich, are you prepared to address this?
Sure, let's get it on the floor. I would move the OTR to fund a grant writer position. And I had spoken with our county administrator about whether this should be in county administration or planning, and the response was planning. So that's why it's there. And following up on the comments I made after the presentation at NISAC that I attended, there's going to be a steady stream of money available through federal and state grants over the next, this year and another 4 years, that are probably something we will not see again. Taking advantage of this in a structured way, I believe makes great good sense. You do not want to apply for grants if you're not prepared to apply in a comprehensive way and to track your grant in a comprehensive way. And much of the cost of having somebody that can do the monitoring and the training that's required for grants can be included in the grant funding itself. So even though we would be looking to fund a position here, it's quite likely that much of this salary line would be obtained through success or reimbursed through successful grants. So I'd move it.
Okay, and I saw Randy's hand, so that's a second, Randy? Thank you. Norma?
I'm not going to vote or anything. No, so after we did this research, I did get word back from the Human Resources Office, and this would actually come in about around 55,000 rather than 76. So I thought that was important for the
That is an
motion.
important thing. What number do you have? 50?
It would be 55,000 plus fringe, and I can calculate that. So you have
All
that
right.
total.
At that amount, I would move it. Is that-
I guess,
Can we get that exact number first?
Yep.
That you're moving?
Yeah, it would be 55,000 on salary, and I think Norma is calculating the fringe. And I'm fine with that since I asked for these numbers as an estimate.
So the total would be 79,294.
Okay, well, I have a couple of questions. First of all, I guess I'd like to hear about how Katie feels this is going to fit into her department. And then secondly, I know that this is a multi-year one-time, and I know that it's difficult to hire people and get good applicants if they don't feel like they've got a long-term future in the job. So I guess that might be something else that Katie could address for us. Katie?
Yeah, I would just say I propose multi-year because of exactly what you said, that you want to have somebody there who's qualified, and it would be hard to get somebody on a one-year basis. And going through the 3 years was to try to track this wave of grants that potentially.
Which may
will be out.
evaporate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Katie, and you want to weigh in? Because this is going to really affect you.
Yeah, sure. I guess maybe I think it requires a little more discussion as to where this might make the most sense to be the home. But at any rate, I think it's a really interesting idea, and I certainly want to see the county tap as many grant resources as possible. And that takes dedicated focus to make that really happen. There are a couple of thoughts that I had on that, which is that I'm just wondering about the approach of having a staff person versus entering into a contract with a consulting firm that is a kind of a professional grant writer. They have pretty high success rates, and they could actually help all of our department heads look at what the possibilities are to achieve the goals that hopefully we will define in the strategy that our department and administration are going to be leading with the legislature to define goals and priorities for county government. Could take a look at what we're trying to achieve, what grant programs can help us get to that level, and what departments might make sense to lead efforts like that, and then write the grants to help us to do that. I guess I just wonder, because grant funding is very intensive during certain months and then kind of nothing going on. And it's kind of like consultants may be better suited to do that kind of work than a staff person. Just kind of throwing those ideas out there for you to consider.
Okay, Lee. Thank you, Katie.
Kind of a question for both Rich and Katie, given that last part. Are you envisioning that the grant writer would also be a grant administrator, or would that end up falling back in? So
Yes.
So whatever they generate, they would be working with. And is that what happens, Katie, in a situation where you have a consultant that's seeking grants for you? Do they continue on in some capacity to do the grant reporting and administration?
They can do that. It really depends on the grant. Some grants have funding for that. Others require competitive solicitation. So they could write the grant for you, and then you would have to do an RFP to find out who could do the administration portion of it. But a lot of municipalities take that approach. They enter into relationships with contractors and consultants who start to understand the goals of the government, and then they can proactively identify grant sources for you and figure out how you're going to administer it. Administering contracts is intensive work, and the county has so many of them. I would wonder whether it's in somebody's ability to administer all the county grants with all the different funding sources, and each one has their own, 100-page guidebook that goes with the grant, and getting up to speed on every one of those things will be very difficult for one person to do, I think.
Would it be easier for a contractor, Katie?
Yes, that's what they, that's their bread and butter. A lot of contractors, that's what they do, is they do the grant writing, and then they could also do the grant administration if the grant allowed that, and they would help think through how you would go through that procurement process.
So they would have a staff that, can weigh in on different areas of expertise.
Yeah, they usually have like one staff person does the community development block grants, and one person does federal, whatever, some other pot of money. So they become very specialized in those certain areas. So, and they develop relationships with the funders. So it makes it easier for them to get questions answered and that kind of thing too.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Henry, Mike Lane, and then Dan Klein.
Yes, I was wondering, I know Rich went to the NISAC presentation and heard about everything. Is there perception among department heads that there are grants out there that are not being written by us because of staff time?
I
Is that a
think
question for me or Lisa?
Lisa.
Okay, great.
I can take a stab at it. I think that my answer to that would probably be, we don't know what we don't know. Not necessarily that department heads would say, no, I've got this covered. It's, there are probably grants coming, and I also went to NISAC and heard some of the federal grant opportunities that are out there. They're kind of coming fast and furious in several different areas around infrastructure and so forth. So it, I guess that's how I would answer that. It's, there are more now than there have been in the past, and unless we're out there looking for them, we may be missing them, but I'm not in a position to say how many or what percentage.
Okay. Also, assuming that we hire someone, how will they interact with all the departments in terms of knowing what grants are out there and being able to interact, since this will be in planning, not county administration, how will they interact with the rest of the departments?
And I think, we can talk further about placement and whether if this would be a staff or a subcontractor. But I think, for instance, if there were highway infrastructure grants available, they would need to get an understanding of what our highway department is currently doing and what we may or may not be eligible for. There would need to be relationships established with the department head that's in charge of that subject area. Same would be true of planning if it were broadband related, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
So if we hired a contractor, do they just kind of have a general portfolio of, it's their job to look at everything that's out there and let us know? How does that work? I don't know if that's a question for Lisa or Katie.
I would imagine there would be an RFP process and we would determine the terms under which they would operate.
Okay, thank you. All right, I've got Mike Lane, Dan, Annie, and Greg.
I really appreciate Rich bringing this to us and back from NISAC. I thought that was an important thing that he stressed for us. But I also am very interested in exactly what Katie just told us about a consultant, because I think about the smaller municipalities that don't have planning departments, and that's what they use. They get consultants for CDBG grants, for other things all the time. They don't have the staff to be able to write the grants or to administer them, and they have to go to consultants, and they get the grants and they get administered. So I think that if we want to spend the money, we could put it into a contingency, or we could just plan on if planning came to us or administration came to us and said they needed X dollars to, for consultants for a particular grant program, we could authorize it out of contingency.
Or have a general, an RFP go out for a general relationship. Sure. Okay, I've got Dan, Annie, Greg, and Rich.
I had had the same thought about maybe a consultant might be better in this sense. You know, if we got lucky and got a really good grant writer as a staff person, then that would be better, but that's a bit of a gamble. On the other hand, consultants are going to be a lot more money than what's on this piece of paper here. So I would have a hard time making a decision tonight because I don't really know how to think about the costs of a consultant. And so I'm wondering if we would consider tabling this for now. So, and I don't know who would do the research between now and next time, but just to give us some ideas of what we might be looking at to pay a consultant to do the kind of work we're thinking about.
Thank you, Dan. Rich, you want to address that?
Yeah, the trade-off is you spend a lot more on a consultant and you're going to have more resource at a consulting group because there's more people there. The trade-off is they're never going to know the county like somebody who works here. You know, it's the same thing, say, with hiring a general counsel inside a company or hiring outside counsel. Yeah, you get lots more specialties with the law firm, but they never understand the business. And that's the same thing here. So I'd be happy to put this off. I had hoped that I was going to get the PowerPoint. They said that they were going to share those at NISAC with everybody, and I think they just haven't done it yet. And I, in fact, looked on my computer just a little while ago to see if it had come through, and it has not. I think if we had the slides, at least that would help us, and maybe we could get some sense of what a consultant would cost or consultants would cost. So I'm happy if we want to put this off for now.
Did you want to withdraw it for now?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So it's 7:30, folks. Did you want to break up now or try to go further?
I'm sorry, can I just a point of order?
Sure.
So I like the idea of like putting it off for now, but do we need to have some idea of who's gonna look into this to like to look in, you know, versus a staff person versus a consulting group? So we have more information in addition to the slides?
Yeah, certainly. I could try to get the slides, but Katie seems to know about it, consultants. So maybe she could give us some sense on what consultants would cost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm happy to look into that and report back next week.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, everybody. Good work. Good night. See you next time.
Good night.
Thank you.
Deborah, when is next time?
Next time is the 11th. I guess that's next Tuesday.